What is up, everybody? Welcome into the 2020 Visions podcast. My name is J. Raj, and I'm glad that you're here. Today, we got some things to discuss. I'm going to be going over my personal list of Marvel's top 5 rivalries. I'm going to go into a deeper conversation about the dynamics between the Jedi and the Sith in Star Wars, and some patterns that I've noticed about that. I'm also going to briefly discuss a little bit about the future for the Lego video games, and then we got some other random stuff to discuss as well. But I'm glad you're here. Let's get this thing started. So to get this thing started, I'm going to be diving into my top 5 biggest Marvel rivalries. This is my list, and I think a lot of these have been represented on screen. Now, whether they've been done justice or not, that is a whole nother story. But I will say, because I'm, going in depth on this, I've chose to not do a comic book overview for this week's episode. So with that being said, if anybody listening to this would like to drop some comic book recommendations in my comments, not only is that going to give me ideas of more comics that I should go over, but it will also help me get boosted with the algorithm since I'm trying to grow this podcast, So it's greatly appreciated. Feel free to do all that and like and subscribe. But to get started, and this is in no particular order, or maybe I'll rank it at the end, in my opinion. But first, we're just going to go over 5 rivalries, then I may or may not rank them. My first one that I'm going to talk about is Magneto and Charles Xavier, Professor X. So we have seen this one on screen. It's more of a rivalry of ideals, because we know that both of them have positions of leadership over mutants. Whether their position is a good influence or a bad influence, that's a whole nother thing. But they both can influence mutants deeply, and we know that in Marvel, mutants are not really accepted in society by the humans as much as they should be. They're really discriminated against. So Xavier and Magneto have different thoughts of how that should be handled. So they disagree on how mutants coexist. Magneto, he thinks that humans are going to inevitably want to destroy mutants. So he thinks that the mutants should just go ahead and seize power to rule over the humans first. He believes that mutants are the superior beings and that therefore they should rule over the humans. And this comes from, Magneto's origin, which is he's a Holocaust survivor, and he watched him and his family were all part of the Holocaust, and his family all got killed except for him. So with that being said, he's seen discrimination firsthand, and that plays a major role in his current mindset about how mutants are going to get treated, because he's seen how, Jews got treated in the Holocaust. So he thinks, history is going to repeat itself and the mutants are going to be victims of that. So while Magneto believes in that, Charles Xavier, he believes in peace and he believes in coexistence, to where, he thinks mutants and humans can both coexist in society and benefit from each other. But yeah, so Magneto believes that the hatred from humans is unavoidable, but Professor X believes that they can all coexist, humans and mutants. And he does believe that Charles Xavier forming the X-Men is Charles being naive, because he feels like Charles is holding back the X-Men, that they're being tamed per se. Which Magneto wants them to fully embrace their power and just accept that they are and always will be more powerful than the humans. So a perfect example of Magneto wanting to take things in his own hands and just deciding that he's going to basically declare war on humans because of the corruption and the discrimination against the mutants. It's during the Fatal Attractions comic book storyline. And a vicious side of Magneto comes out to where he puts out an EMP over the whole world, which causes, hundreds of millions of people to not have power. It caused a lot of tragic events when Magneto, messed up the put out an electromagnetic pulse using his powers to intentionally just disrupt the way the whole Earth was running that day, because he was officially declaring war on the humans. So basically, in this storyline, Professor X sent some of the X-Men there because it's causing tragedies, this EMP that Magneto put out. And Wolverine ended up getting behind Magneto and stabbing him pretty good. But in the meantime, Magneto ended up deciding to completely rip the adamantium out of Wolverine. And this is a famous comic. They actually showed this, happening on the X-Men 97 show that came out a couple years ago. And so he put out an electromagnetic pulse to signal war on the humans, rip the adamantium from Wolverine's body, and so ended up Charles Xavier decided that he had to put his own morals aside to, keep Magneto from harming more people. So Charles Xavier ends up physically erasing Magneto's mind and his memories in order to protect people. This usually goes against Charles's, beliefs. He has the ability to tap into every mind on Earth using Cerebro, but he usually doesn't unless they are knowingly aware of this. But because of Magneto's extreme measures with the EMP, Charles literally erased Magneto's mind. And it was like this for a while. Magneto didn't have memories. But one cool thing about Magneto is that kind of is why he wears his helmet, though. It's to try to help protect him from Charles Xavier's telekinetic powers. He doesn't want freaking Professor X fiddling in his brain without him needing to. So that's a little cool fact. And there's been other instances where Professor X has still, went on to erase Magneto's memories. This isn't the only story. So that's pretty messed up. First off, Magneto's putting the EMP on the whole world because he's trying to declare war on the humans. And then Professor X, to protect the humans and the mutants, like Wolverine, Professor X completely wiped Magneto's brain. So that's pretty crazy. They got a lot of instances like that, and it's just wild because they used to be friends, but their ideals are just so different. And it just kind of sucks for the mutants. Like, they're so easily influenced, some of them. So some of them, you got Cyclops, who's literally a Boy Scout. He'll do anything Professor X says. And then you got dudes like Toad that are on the Brotherhood under Magneto, who he's not going to do anything to cross Magneto. He's always going to be there at his beck and call. And, the X-Men, I don't think they would even accept Toad. So they both have positions of power, and they're both very extreme in their ways. So it's just like a rivalry of ideals. But then the second rivalry I'm going to go into, it's actually Spider-Man and Green Goblin. And this actually comes from, obviously it originates in the comics, but my favorite movie of all time, with Revenge of the Sith is second, but my favorite movie of all time is the Spider-Man, the first one with Tobey Maguire, where Green Goblin is the villain. And we can see that Green Goblin terrorizes Peter's personal life. And that's the thing. In the comics, what goes down is Norman Osborn, he learns Spider-Man's identity. He learns that it's Peter Parker. And he decides that the best way to beat Spider-Man is to first beat Peter Parker and attack his personal life, like I said before. So in a few major instances, here's a few examples. Green Goblin, he kidnapped Gwen Stacy, and which was Spider-Man's girlfriend at the time, and he dropped her to her death, all to get, the upper hand over Spider-Man. He attacked Peter Parker's life, and he puts all his other family in danger as well. And this, at the time in comics, this actually kind of represented a change in the way that people viewed comics, because usually, comics, they would show friends of a character back then, but usually the characters wouldn't get hurt other than the heroes. So this was kind of a new concept at the time for a villain to go after a hero's loved ones. And as we know, like, that actually gets shown in all kind of different comic stories now. So this was revolutionary at the time. And, this also signified the fact that Peter Parker, being Spider-Man, will always endanger the people that he loves. So he has to be very careful with who he lets himself get close to. And we've seen this dynamic in, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. We see how he's very hesitant to get with MJ. And we've also seen this in the Amazing Spider-Man movies with Andrew Garfield. Him and Gwen Stacy, he had made a promise to Gwen's dad, which was the police chief that ended up getting killed. He had made a promise to him to keep Gwen out of it because he saw that Spider-Man was Peter. He wanted his daughter safe. So Pete had to make a promise to keep Gwen out of it, so they ended up breaking up. Of course, they got back together, and we saw what happens. Exactly what I said happened in the comics. Gwen ends up being kidnapped by Green Goblin, dropped to her death. So that's what happens when Peter Parker lets himself get too close to people. And it's really a sad thing. It really is. And so that's kind of what makes that rivalry intense. Like I said, it was like revolutionary at the time in the comics, because usually a hero's friends aren't going to get attacked. So it made a new dynamic that for decades to come is featured in comics. And one of my favorite rivalries that we're going to be seeing soon in the movies, once again, it's going to be Dr. Doom and Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic. So here's the thing, the backstory. Victor Von Doom and Reed Richards were roommates in college. And Dr. Doom, Victor Von Doom, has always been obsessed with being intellectually superior more than Reed Richards. And time again, he ends up getting proven otherwise. So this really drives a hatred for Reed, because he wants to be better than him, but time and time again, Reed ends up proving that he actually is superior, the superior intellect. So basically, Dr. Doom, his mother had died, and she was basically in hell, and Mephisto was had his mother's soul. So in college, Dr. Doom was going to build a machine that would take him to his deceased mother and basically rescue her from hell, from Mephisto. So Doom is building this machine so that he can rescue his deceased mother's soul. And Reed Richards warned him. He said, hey, you got some calculations wrong with your machine that you're creating. But Victor Von Doom, being the arrogant person that he is, he kind of framed it like, oh, you're just trying to mess me up. You're lying to me. You just want me to fail. So Victor Von Doom, Dr. Doom, chose not to listen. He did not tweak his machine how he really should have, because Reed Richards was telling the truth. And this resulted in, not only could he not get to his mother's soul to save her, but the whole machine exploded. And this gave Dr. Doom scarring on his face. And that's one reason that in the comics, you rarely ever see Dr. Doom's face, is because under that mask, he has terrible scars that are just hard to look at. But here's the thing. There is some lore in the comics that early lore, it suggests that the initial scar actually was very minor, but due to the psychological impact on his mind from his failure, he ended up seeking out some monks to create the mask for him. And while the mask was still hot from the forge, Dr. Doom commanded it to be placed on his face, which that is truly what turned his minor scars into horrific scars. So he rarely ever takes the mask off, and the mask represents his failure. And he's obsessed with the fact that he failed. It gets at him every day. He looks in the mirror, and that mask represents his failure. He's obsessed with it, and he often blames Reed Richards for tampering with the machine prior to that, because he can't accept that he just had a calculation wrong. In his head, he has to justify it. Oh, Reed Richards must have tweaked with this. So for years, this builds even more hatred, more and more by the years when they go by. And he just can't accept that he miscalculated anything. It's like he thinks so highly of his own mind that when he fails, he has to blame someone else. So knowing Reed Richards was right drives him crazy. But here's the thing that kind of makes this rivalry even more interesting. There's a dynamic where Victor Von Doom, although him and Reed Richards hate each other, he actually is fairly close to Valeria Richards, which is Reed and Sue Storm's daughter. So there's a story in the comics where Reed Richard was off planet out doing a mission, and Sue Storm was pregnant, and she started having her baby, and it was getting to where she was close to passing away in childbirth, and Dr. Doom ended up stepping in, saving Sue Storm's life while she gave birth to Valeria. And now Dr. Doom, Victor Von Doom, is now sometimes called Uncle Doom from Valeria Richards, and he is also her godfather. So he really believes that he can provide for Reed Richards' family more than Reed can, provide in ways that Reed cannot. And really, Doom is kind of obsessed with Sue Storm. Like, he kind of, in a way, he wishes he was Reed Richards. He wishes he had the mind of Reed Richards. He wishes he had the family of Reed Richards, the wife of Reed Richards. He's obsessed that he is not on the level of Reed Richards. And in the 2015 Secret Wars storyline, there's two Secret Wars storylines, one from the 80s, one from 2015. But in the 2015 one, while Doom created Battleworld, he made himself, quote unquote, God Emperor Doom. Basically where he fooled everyone that was in that reality into thinking he was God. The scales get pulled back from their eyes. They eventually realize what's going on, put a stop to them. But in that reality, he had made Sue Storm his wife because he had everyone under his spell. And, they were in this false reality where they thought Dr. Doom was God, and he basically had anything he wanted, including Reed Richards' wife, Sue Storm. But the thing is, Sue Storm kind of likes the validation that Dr. Doom gives her, because Reed gets so busy with, in the comics, he wants to literally, quote unquote, solve everything. So he's constantly away from the family. He's never there to, for Sue to confide in. And, sometimes Dr. Doom actually gives Sue Storm more validation than Reed, because he actually has let Sue Storm know, I'm talking about Dr. Doom, he makes sure to let her know how much he respects her, because he believes that she is the most powerful of the Fantastic Four. So in a way, Sue Storm does get even more validation from Dr. Doom than her own husband, Reed Richards. So it's just a really weird dynamic, the hatred, the jealousy that Doom has for Reed, but also Dr. Doom is a little closer to, seemingly at times, closer to the Richards family than Reed is himself. So anyway, I'm excited about Avengers Doomsday, Avengers Secret Wars, more Fantastic Four stuff to come out. me personally, I got to get more into the comics with them. Sometimes it's kind of hard when you got them facing Mole Man. I'm just like, I don't really care about Mole Man, but when you give it patience, the Fantastic Four comic lines are some gems, and I'm looking forward to reading some more of it. But the rivalry I'm going over after that is Captain America and Iron Man. And this is another, we've seen this on screen, and they actually did this one justice with the, Captain America Civil War, just that whole Civil War storyline. So here's the thing, Captain America and Iron Man, Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, they started off as friends on the Avengers, but there were tragedies that happened during their missions that ended up killing nearby civilians. All these explosions happening, Tony Stark using the weapons on his suit. There's going to be cars blowing up. There's going to be just crazy things that happen. And unfortunately, there are civilians, innocent ones that, get killed in the line of fire. And part of it is because the heroes were kind of reckless in their fighting. So basically, the government, after some of these tragedies where innocent civilians got hurt or killed, the government demanded that superheroes register their identities and receive government oversight. So this is where it comes into play. Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, Captain America, have different mindsets on this. Tony Stark, he supports it, but Captain America doesn't. And, I got to respect Cap a little more because I always looked at him like, oh, he's a Boy Scout. Like, he'd take whatever orders, he just does whatever they tell him to. But no, Cap, he's like, nah, like, I don't think it's a good idea for there to be a government oversight because Captain America, he doesn't, think there should be oversight since he fears that heroes will be turned into political weapons and tools for corrupt government leaders. And, a great example of this is the Weapon X program with Wolverine. Wolverine was a soldier, but then he got drawn in, he got his mind wiped, and he got brainwashed into becoming a killer for the government, for Canada. So that's a perfect example, and Cap is right. Like, if you give the government too much oversight over the heroes, they will take advantage of it. That's just my mindset. But so Captain America also feared that revealing their identities, since they would have to do that when they register, that it would put their families in danger. The superheroes, that is. And that's true too. Like I said earlier, a lot of villains, when they figure out the identities of these heroes, they're going to terrorize that hero's family because they know that's the fastest way to break them down mentally and weaken them. So Cap was right, in my opinion. That would put the heroes in danger and their families, if their identities were revealed. But to Tony Stark's views, Tony Stark, he viewed it as a compromise. Like, obviously, that wasn't the first ideal thing he wanted, was government oversight, but in a way, he kind of felt guilty for his part in innocent people being killed on the street because they were in the line of fire during the Avengers fights. So Tony viewed it as a compromise, but he, and he wanted to help the general public feel safe by having the heroes be held accountable. So he believed that it was a system that would prevent tragedy. And like I said before, this ends up leading up into the Civil War comic line. And there's some heroes that end up joining Iron Man because they feel the way Iron Man did. And then there's some that join Captain America and they refuse to get registered. So the ones that, end up joining up with Captain America, they have to operate in the shadows while trying to avoid being arrested and sent to prison. And, this Civil War comic line, Tony Stark and Steve Rogers are the two main players in this because it's their ideals. They're the leaders of each side. And it's crazy. It's a crazy comic line. Heroes end up turning on each other. There's teams that break up. And their rivalry kind of indirectly impacted the heroic community because it created a lot of negative division between them. And, if people see heroes fighting each other, they're going to wonder, like, okay, are we even safe? Like, are they even responsible enough to protect us if they're fighting each other? So, yeah, Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, that runs deep. Big time rivalry right there. And it's, it's kind of wrapped up on screen, but who knows what kind of flashbacks could be shown on, Doomsday or just future movies, or if Iron Man and Captain America ever get recasted. But yeah, read the Civil War comic line. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. They got an intense rivalry. And the next rivalry I'm going to go over, it has to do with two guys kind of that were involved in the Weapon X program that I was talking about before, the Canadian government's Weapon X program, where they created super soldiers but had them brainwashed to where they were, they had no choice but to do what they were ordered to do. So this next rivalry is Wolverine and Sabretooth. We've seen it on screen. I think it was done sort of good on screen. But so like I said, they both, Wolverine and Sabretooth, shared experience in Weapon X, that program. And they were both made into weapons for the government, which made them undergo harsh experiments, memory tampering, and just torture and violence in order for the government to be able to control them. And one thing about Wolverine and Sabretooth that the comics do unveil or reveal is that they are both part of a group of feral mutants called the lupines. So basically, lupines are a wolf-like species that they are animalistic in nature. They have just a lot of tendencies of wolves. So with that being said, the way that they handle these urges, we'll say, is different. So Sabretooth, he kind of leans into his because he takes pleasure in bringing people pain, attacking people just randomly, and leaning into the animalistic side of their species, of them being lupines. But Wolverine, he wants to be better, though. He wants to resist the urges. He wants to, just be the best version of himself that he can. And he's also got the X-Men helping hold him accountable. But here's a crazy mind game that Sabretooth plays with Wolverine. Sabretooth knows that Wolverine doesn't have a lot of memory of his past. So what Sabretooth will do to get Wolverine all out of sorts and, help his mental state go down, he will say that he was the one that was responsible for the deaths of Wolverine's loved ones, whether it's true or not. He'll purposefully make up that lie just to break Wolverine down because he knows that Wolverine can't remember if that's true or not. That's pretty sad. Wolverine might believe a ton of lies about himself, and it torments Wolverine mentally. Another thing about Sabretooth and his brutality is that he brings to this rivalry is that every year Sabretooth brutally attacks Wolverine on his birthday or murders someone close to Wolverine in order to torment him on his birthday. Happy birthday, Wolverine. Here's a beatdown. That's crazy. And it's literally just for the heck of it. He's leaning into that animalistic side, and he loves bringing people pain, especially Wolverine. So they do have similar origins, being involved in Weapon X, both being lupines. They both have that healing factor. But what they do with their powers and what they do with their conscience versus what their instincts are is what makes this rivalry intense and interesting, because it's two guys that have very similar power sets and backstory, but the way that they carry themselves and handle themselves is just completely opposite. And Sabretooth is just mean to that dude Wolverine. But yeah, so that was my top 5 favorite rivalries in Marvel. And I'm just going to sit here and say this. I think that my number one favorite, because I am partial to the X-Men stuff, I think my number one favorite is Sabretooth and Wolverine. But one that I'm most excited for to see more of is Reed Richards and Doctor Doom. I cannot wait for Avengers Doomsday. And I really hope that they do go into the backstory of how they know each other, like, or their history in college together. I would like to see flashbacks of that stuff. Not how the 2016 Fantastic Four movie did, because that was some booty cheeks. But hopefully they just do this better on screen. Reed Richards and Doctor Doom. I'm going to say that's my favorite rivalry at the moment. But it's subject to change. So, yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed that. Like I said, I didn't do a comic book overview, but if you got any suggestions, drop them in the comments. So this next thing I'm talking about is, has to do with Star Wars. Like I said, I have some mindsets about the dynamics between the Jedi and the Sith. And this is coming off of last episode. I went over Maul Shadow Lord, kind of, gave a recap of that. And one thing I mentioned was that I feel like the Jedi, they say that attachment leads to the dark side. But it's clear that a lot of the Jedi, and in the example of Maul Shadow Lord, the Jedi who survived Order 66, they are too attached to their old ways. And the perfect example of that is Master Daki. He was not willing to fight in a more aggressive style like Darth Maul suggested when they were fighting Darth Vader. And it ended up being his demise, if you know what I'm saying. So yeah, I feel like the Jedi, they're brought up in this big echo chamber, but the thing is the galaxy changes. So, and I had posted clips of this, and I got a lot of responses online. Some people agree, some people disagree, but it sparked up conversation, and that's what us fans love, So that's another thing I want to just do is encourage y'all to comment, because it sparks up some really good combos. It's really interesting to hear different people's mindsets and their takes or whatever on this. So, but I have some examples, and I got my receipts. So I got some examples of how I think the Jedi were wrong in their way of handling things. They always want order, and they always have to meet with the council before they make decisions and things like that. But there has been 3 or 4 times over the history of Star Wars films that there was opportunity to bring balance to the Force, but the Jedi, being stuck in their ways, kept it from happening. They did not let balance be brought to the Force when it could have been. And so here's the thing. First, we're going to flash to Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Count Dooku has Obi-Wan in custody. And Dooku literally starts telling Obi-Wan everything. He tells Obi-Wan about the plans of the Sith. And he says that there's a Sith Lord by the name of Darth Sidious that, him and Obi-Wan can work together and destroy the Sith. And Obi-Wan, even though the whole game plan, the actual game plan that was happening, was being all laid out for him, he says, no, the Jedi would have sensed it. You got too much trust for the Jedi. Obi-Wan didn't realize how inconsistent the Jedi were and how much they contradict themselves. So his response to Dooku, who formerly was a Jedi, Count Dooku was, he says, the Jedi would have sensed it. And then he ends up saying, I will never join you, Count Dooku. And I got some more to say about that, but we're going to move on to the next instance that I've noticed. So we got Ahsoka and Darth Maul in Star Wars The Clone Wars, right as Order 66 is taking place. So Darth Maul ends up basically telling Ahsoka that Anakin Skywalker is set up to be Darth Sidious's new apprentice. And, Maul explains his plans that he purposefully had wanted to lure Anakin to Mandalore to kill him. and to deprive Darth Sidious from his prize pupil. And here's another fall of the Jedi. At the time, Ahsoka was not a Jedi, but she was formerly a Jedi and still had the thoughts of that echo chamber in her head. She said, I know, Anakin, your vision is flawed. Ahsoka caught herself thinking she knew everything. It's the Jedi way, thinking they know everything. They trust that they're thinking of the Force and what the Force leads them to think is superior. So she says, I know, Anakin, your vision is flawed. She thinks Anakin could never become Darth Vader. But Maul pleaded with her. He said, join me, and we can put a stop to this. And I truly believe that instance with Count Dooku and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka and Darth Maul were both opportunities to bring balance to the Force. And we got more questions about what's balanced to the Force that I'm going to dive into as well. But the next example is Luke and Darth Vader. In The Empire Strikes Back, Darth Vader, he tells Luke, he says, join me and I will complete your training. With our combined strength, we can end this destructive conflict and bring order to the galaxy. And of course, Luke is like, no, I will never join you, and all that corny crap. So that's the thing. Luke, of course, he didn't have his training quite completed yet, but he ended up becoming a Jedi, and he chose to assume the worst of Darth Vader, and he said, no, I will never join you, as if he is the absolute worst thing ever. I know that Luke and Darth Vader seemingly brought balance to the Force in episode 6, but it could have been done earlier and less people would have got hurt. So another example, and this is, kind of my least favorite, but also there's Rey and Kylo Ren. They're fighting, and Kylo Ren offers for Rey to join him and that they can rule the First Order. Rey turns him down. But I want to dive into a pattern with this, and here's the thing. We can call them Sith, or we could just call them dark side users for this pattern that I'm about to point out. All of those dark side users in each of these situations, they had dipped their toe into the dark side in a major way. But they all had things happening that I think revealed the extremity of the evil that they were part of. And I think they truly were second guessing themselves whether they wanted to fully embrace the dark side. If we look at Obi-Wan and Count Dooku, we know that Count Dooku formerly was a Jedi. And if you fast forward to Count Dooku with his death, Palpatine betrayed him. I think that Count Dooku was starting to see some patterns and seeing that Palpatine might betray me. And he's a Jedi. Maybe he can help. Maybe he can actually see the future some. I think that maybe in the moment where Count Dooku offers help to Obi-Wan for them to join, maybe Dooku had in his head that he knew he was going to be betrayed, so he needs to actually put a stop to the Sith. Then we flash to Ahsoka and Darth Maul. Darth Maul, he was cast aside. He was left to die on Naboo when he was chopped in half. He was left to die, and I guarantee you Palpatine knew he lived. And even after Palpatine did realize he lived, he came up there, and Darth Maul was like, Master, I've been building all of this just in hopes to join you again. Palpatine said, there can only be two. Kills Darth Maul's brother. That's evil. That is evil. Darth Maul, he was a victim of the extreme evil. His whole life, actually. He was kidnapped from Dathomir, forced to train. His mother was killed by Palpatine. So, could Darth Maul have actually wanted to join Ahsoka truly to defeat the Sith, not even necessarily to deceive her? And I think he truly had good intentions, because the dude has one of the most tragic stories. Then if we flash to Darth Vader trying to get Luke to join him. The way that Vader was betrayed was when, before he even put the suit on, he was promised, if you join me, Padme will be alive, or whatever freaking Palpatine said. He told him that if he joins Palpatine's side, that Padme will be rescued and saved, and that she will not die in childbirth. What's the first thing Palpatine does whenever Darth Vader gets the suit on? He lies to him and tells Vader that he's the one who killed her in your own anger. It's a freaking lie, and he laughs when Vader breaks down. Vader was betrayed, and I guarantee you, over the years as Darth Vader, he probably played that out in his head, and he probably knew, because he did say, I felt it, she was alive. He probably knew that he was betrayed by Palpatine. I mean, obviously, he didn't deliver how he said because Padme died. So Vader had saw the extreme manipulation and he was a prime example of it as well. And then, like I said, I don't really care that much about the recent trilogy, but if you look at Kylo Ren, he had just had a run-in with Snoke. Snoke was basically threatening Kylo Ren that if you don't do things the way I say, you're not going to be around here. So Kylo Ren also, he was realizing the evil of Snoke, and that he's like, why am I working for this dude? And sure enough, he ended up wanting Rey to join after killing Snoke, but she denied it. In the end, he did help her in episode 9, but so that's a pattern. Every one of those dark side users, or we'll call them former Sith, they all either were having the feeling that they were going to die soon, like Dooku. They were either, picking up that they were going to be betrayed, already had been lied to, like Darth Vader when it came to Padme. Supposedly she was going to be saved. No, she didn't get saved. She died. And Palpatine lied. And then, Darth Maul, he had already experienced all this crap. I think that all those dark side users in those moments, they truly wanted to stop the Sith and stop Palpatine. But all these Jedis, they're arrogant in their own ways, and they all denied it. The game plan was laid out for Obi-Wan. If they would have acted, they could have stopped Order 66. It's ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous, and if the Jedi would have got past their own arrogance, there would have been so many lives saved. Order 66 might not have ever even happened. And it's interesting because Palpatine, he is the definition of the evil Sith. And when he's about to fight Yoda, one thing he says, like I said, I think the Jedi were being arrogant to assume that they just have a full understanding at all times of what's going on. Palpatine, one of the first things he said is, your arrogance blinds you, Master Yoda. I think he's telling the truth. And yeah, so one thing I will say after that is I don't feel like all the dark side users are Sith, obviously. And I do think that they could have brought balance to the Force. And that's a whole nother question, is what is balance to the Force? So, what I've always heard is bringing balance to the Force is a balance between the dark and the light. And to me, that makes perfect sense, especially for these situations, because it's two extremes. The Jedi always assume they're right. The Sith, they only want power, and they're willing to betray each other. It's to their own demise. The Sith, they're always going to end up dying because they're going to betray each other. The Jedi, they're never going to get anything done because they're so arrogant to just think that nothing deeper is going on. So it's like two extremities. But if you have two people, which the perfect situation would have been Ahsoka and Darth Maul, two people who have both been on the extreme, but both left. Ahsoka was no longer part of the Jedi. Darth Maul was no longer Darth Sidious's apprentice. If you get two people like that can see the flaws on both sides, I think that's what brings balance. Um, but yeah, I mean, some people say, to destroy the Sith is to bring balance. But, I mean, I agree to a certain extent. But I also think the Jedi need to learn that they actually have flaws as well. And, with it being said that, the Jedi need to realize they have their own flaws as well, one scene that a lot of people were confused about in one of the movies in the most recent trilogy, The Last Jedi, was when Yoda's ghost, his Force ghost, appears and burns the ancient Jedi texts. What if that was obviously, Yoda was trying to guide Luke a certain way? What if that is because even Yoda, being a Force ghost, realized that the Jedi can't hold on to their old way of doing things? Like, the Sith is destroyed. You got to adapt and change. So, after thinking about that this week, it makes me not hate that scene as much as I used to on The Last Jedi. Like, it makes more sense now. So, yeah. I know this was a deep convo, but this is a convo I'm loving to have. And, if y'all get any thoughts on this, really comment. I'm going to probably clip the heck out of this because I love, just how open-ended these Star Wars combos can get. So, yeah. We're going to move next, though, into my reaction to the Punisher special presentation that actually came out last week. So the Punisher special presentation, it came out, I'm wanting to say it was like May 12th or something. Anyway, I watched it and I was a little thrown off, I'll admit it, because one of the ways they had announced this was they included this on the release schedule for Daredevil Born Again. So, it made it seem like, okay, the events of Born Again are going to lead directly into the Punisher special. But Punisher special just felt like its own thing. Like, it was not at all connected to Daredevil at all, except for Frank did have a hallucination of Karen being there. Karen Page was kind of comforting him, but then he realized that she's literally an hallucination. It shows Frank kind of going crazy because he doesn't know what to do after seemingly killing everyone who was involved in his family's murder. So the last group of people that was victims of that was the Nucci family, who ran a crime family. And the leader was Ma Nucci, which is this lady in a wheelchair, and she's in the Welcome Back Frank storyline that I actually did read recently. So basically, it's set up like Frank just killed the whole family of the Nucci family because they were somehow involved with his family's death, and then it goes on to show him, just tripping out. Like, when he doesn't have a target in mind, he doesn't know how to function. But he ends up, fixating on this family that runs a store in his area, which his area is overrun with crime. And that family is put in danger. And he I think he sees his daughter and the daughter of the store owner. So basically it shows him just running to save them from some violence of the criminals on the street. But in the meantime, Ma Nucci, the only surviving member of that family that was connected to the murders, which I don't know why Frank just didn't take her out, she confronts him in a parking lot with a buff dude next to her and basically says that he killed her whole family. And just like he had the wrath to go after who killed his family, she has the wrath to go after the man who killed hers, which is Frank. So she gave him a time, and she said, at this time, as soon as the clock hits that, all the thugs in this neighborhood are going to come after you because I've put a hit on your head for $1 million. So that's basically what the whole presentation was. It was literally just him fighting off a bunch of random thugs at an apartment complex. And I will say, like, at the end, the Ma Nucci lady, like, she she gets away. So it seems like, they might be setting up like another Punisher show. If I'm being honest, we got Daredevil Born Again, which is basically a reboot of the Netflix show. To me, it seems like because Monucci is still alive, they might be setting up a future Punisher series. That's my thoughts on it. I mean, I don't know. Like, the action was intense, but I just wanted it to feel more connected, to break that mold of just people thinking that the special presentations aren't connected. I was thinking, oh yeah, surely like this is going to be connected. They put it on the Daredevil schedule. Duh. But no, like nothing about Spider-Man, nothing about Daredevil. It was its own thing. I mean, obviously John Bernthal's a great actor, plays the role so well, but I don't know. I got left being a little disappointed by it, but I hope they give us some more Punisher stuff. It's just crazy because for months I've been hyping that presentation up. I'm like, oh yeah, and I got all these theories, and nah, it was like, it was not something I should have been making theories about, I guess. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the Punisher special. And another thing I actually did watch today that kind of similar in a way, not fully, was Mando and Grogu. I actually didn't have much expectation for it. I've learned that for myself, if I go in not having that much expectation, that I might actually enjoy stuff more. So that was what I did with Mando and Grogu. It was a solid movie, but it wasn't really connected as much. The New Republic did have their base on Scarif, which is where Jyn Erso from Rogue One is from. So I thought that was cool. Also, I don't know. Actually, that's like the only thing that felt connected. I mean, they had, the Hutts were on there, not Jabba, but I kind of went into it. I was thinking, okay, a perfect example of a movie like this is the Transformer franchise. I grew up, I loved Transformers. I watched every movie. I loved it, got all the action figures. I loved Linkin Park. So whenever the Bumblebee movie a few years ago was coming out, I was like, okay, yeah, of course, like I'm gonna watch that. But that's kind of how the Bumblebee movie was. It was technically a Transformers film, but it was its own thing, and that was actually what my expectation for Mando and Grogu was before I even watched it. I'm like, this is probably like the Bumblebee movie. And sure enough, I was kind of right, but it was still a good watch. I'm not gonna lie. So definitely go watch it. I mean, there's a lot of mixed reviews online, but I think it's worth it. And y'all gotta see how some characters fight. It's kind of funny to see. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but I'm about to just move into a few random news things before we end up wrapping up. So one thing I did mention at the beginning of the episode was that I had a conversation regarding the Lego video games. So this past week, Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight came out, and it was drawing inspiration from every Batman film. Also the animated series. So it has missions that are based on events from each of the films that have been out. So you might have missions from the Dark Knight. You might have missions from the Michael Keaton Batman movies, missions that revolve around the animated series stuff. And there's all kind of suits that span over all of these different projects that you can get. So a conversation I found interesting online was somebody was saying, hey, like if they're going to do these legacy of games, Lego, whoever, legacy of, then what game can we expect next for that? And, an obvious answer could be Spider-Man. Lego Spider-Man, Legacy of the Web Slinger or something. And we could get Tobey Maguire Spider-Man missions, Andrew Garfield the Amazing Spider-Man missions, Tom Holland Spider-Man missions, Spider-Man the Animated Series missions, Ultimate Spider-Man. Give us missions for all that. Give us suits for all that. Lego Spider-Man Legacy of the Web Slinger. Give us what we want, please. Also, and this one interests me the most, Honorable mention, though, we'll say Legacy of Superman. Could that be a good one? I don't know. I don't know if he... I don't know as much about Superman. I'll just put it like that. But the one that stood out to me the most that I saw somebody mention online was Lego Transformers. What I was talking about before. I love Transformers. First off, when's the last time a Transformer game came out? And when has Lego ever released a Transformers game? Never. Not to my knowledge, there's no Lego Transformers game. Why is that, though? I go in the store, I see Lego has Transformers stuff. So, can we please get a Lego Transformers Legacy game that's based on the Transformers movies, that's based on the old Transformers cartoons, that's based around all that? That would be so epic. So, developers for Lego, if you were listening, please release Lego Transformers Legacy game. I just think these ideas are epic. And I will admit, I saw this online. I wouldn't have even thought about that. That could be a new thing they do. So, yeah. That's kind of was my thoughts on that. I just wanted to talk about that. And, if anybody's got any thoughts, just hit up the Raj in the comments. I'm the Raj, by the way. I know that was cheesy, but... So, some random bits of news, though. We'll start out with some Marvel news. And this is about Brad Winderbaum, who was the head of Marvel's animation, department. He had helped with the What If series. He had helped with X-Men 97. He was overseeing that. He was over Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man cartoon, Eyes of Wakanda, Marvel Zombies. He also helped with some live action series because he was over the streaming for Marvel. He was involved with Daredevil Born Again, Loki Season 2, Ironheart. Anyway, Brad Winderbaum got a promotion to where he is now just the head over Marvel. So he's not just over streaming or animation. He oversees all the projects. And, so, a list of movies that he actually has, executively produced was Black Widow, Thor Ragnarok, Thor Love and Thunder, and Ant-Man. So it's I'll let y'all, decide whether you think this is good or not. I think change is good. I will say that. Change is definitely good. And I've enjoyed all the cartoons. If he brings some of them ideas to the big screen, then I'm down for that. Some other news is that WWE fooled us. Or I should say Brock Lesnar fooled us. Because seemingly when he got beat by Obafemi, he left his boots in the ring. This dramatic retirement. People posting their reactions. Oh, Brock Lesnar gone. Oh, he's gone. And in my head, I'm like, I think he's coming back to fight Gunther. He's coming back. I will say that. But just not against Gunther. Because Obafemi was in the ring doing his strut. And then out from the shadows came Brock Lesnar this past Monday on Monday Night Raw. He returned, attacked Oba, and it was revealed Paul Heyman backstage, he was being questioned by Adam Pearce. He's like, what is going on? I literally filled out retirement paperwork for him. And Paul Heyman said that Brock Lesnar had a contract wrote up that he wants to face Obafemi at Clash of Italy. So that they got to get Obafemi's signature now. Brock Lesnar fooled us. And I got to say, I just don't know if I trust WWE retirements anymore. The only one I truly trust is John Cena's. I don't think he's ever coming back. But everybody else, I don't trust it, man. They starting to play us like a fiddle. And they can make all these dirt sheets believe, oh yeah, that was not planned. Brock putting his boots down. That was completely Brock, just doing his own thing. We didn't know that was going to happen. Dude, they're feeding this crap to the dirt sheets just to keep us on our heels and not know what's going on. It's all part of this plan. It'll probably be on WWE Unreal or something. But yeah, one more random thing, though, it does have to do with WWE, is tonight I did watch Saturday night's main event. I know Clash of Italy is next week, and we'll definitely be discussing that next podcast episode. But tonight, I watched Ethan Page versus Penta And that was one of my favorite matches I've seen in a while. Like, I'm liking Ethan Page more and more every week. He's so smooth in the ring. He's very smart, technical, and him and Penta had great chemistry. There was a lot of, last minute kickouts. There was, at one point, Penta was doing a jump off the rope. Ethan Page caught him with a nasty drop kick in midair. The crowd was loving it. And I think it's good because literally Becky Lynch versus Sol Ruca got just... The crowd was a victim to them just building up to the next pay-per-view. They didn't do the fans right with Becky Lynch and Sol Ruca, so Ethan Page and Penta had to put on a show. They definitely did that. And Ethan Page is slowly becoming one of my favorites in WWE. I'm excited to see his rise. But yeah. So honestly, for this podcast episode, it's been a little different. Didn't do the comic book overview, but I do feel like it's been a good convo, and I just appreciate all y'all who have tuned in. I enjoy it every time I get to do this, and I also appreciate y'all interacting. Like, you don't gotta be like the Watcher in Marvel, just watching all the events. You can get involved yourself. Feel free to comment. Feel free to like. Feel free to share. Subscribe. Because we're building a community here, and I don't want y'all to miss out. And subscribing is not a mortgage. You don't got to treat it like you're taking out a mortgage. It's literally the click of a button, and you won't regret it. So if you enjoyed this video and this conversation, the 2020 Visions podcast with me, J. Raj, then drop a RKO to that subscribe button. And I just hope y'all have a great, great evening. And I'm actually going out of town tomorrow. So I'm going to have a great weekend. Y'all do the same. See ya.